It's lovely to see so many people here this morning, and we're just so glad that you can be here to attend 80 years of LWML. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay. Before we begin, we want to thank the members of LWML who provided us with those delicious treats today. Everybody give them a round of applause. And we just want you to know that Shirley Picoy's hat is 62 years old. Not quite as old as LWML, but almost. Another member of LWML who has worked diligently to tell our story today is Joe Centraff, who made that wonderful display over there. And I know a lot of you looked at it as you walked in. I hope more of you will have a chance to look at it as you go out. Thank you, Joe. You do these kinds of things for everybody, Bible school, the whole thing. So thank you so much, and give her a round of applause. Just a reminder, we're also gathering 80 items, socks and underwear for Project Ioway, and there's a tub in the narthex. If you didn't bring your items today, you still have a little time this week. And there's also that box that sits outside of Benita's office, just between Benita's office and the restroom. And so if you haven't brought anything today, you still can do that. And we're going to begin now with a song on your song sheet. The song sheets are on your table. They're printed on both sides. So the one we're going to sing now is Lutheran Women, One and All.
What did the faithful ladies of Trinity do during the 1940s through the 1949? For example, in 1943, the ladies group was called the Concordian Aid Society and had 58 members. Baby quilts were made from the scrap 25 boys serving in World War II, and to others. The meetings usually consist of a short entertainment, the scripture lesson by Pastor Bronner, until he and his family moved to Storm Lake in April, and then the business meeting. The group donated $50 for redecorating the parsonage and did some decorating and cleaning at the parsonage, and provided a grocery shower for the new parsonage. Pastor Lush and his family arrived in June, and he was installed June 13th. For about 2 years, Pastor Lush's devotions featured women of the Bible. There was a picnic at Hall State Park and a Christmas party. On February 9, 1944, the group now called Trinity Ladies Aid became an auxiliary member of the Lutheran Home Finding Society at Fort Dodge, Iowa. This organization later became Lutheran Family Services. Mrs. Dow and Mrs. Schwepke also made hangings for the altar. In May 1946, a motion was made and seconded to give a peace thank offering of $50. On July 3, 1946, a motion was made and seconded that the Trinity Lutheran Aid, Trinity Ladies Aid, would join the Lutheran Women's Missouri League of Iowa Northwest District. They officially became LWML on September 9, 1946. In 1949, the officers of Trinity Ladies Aid were as follows: President, Mrs. Warner Stricker; Vice President, Mrs. Claire Blossom; Secretary was Mrs. Benny Wibben; and Treasurer, Mrs. Gerhard Whitcup. That year, the special committees were membership, flowers, visiting, which was formerly called the Sick Committee, church cleaning, and Christian service. The activities listed were the Christmas sale, Christmas party, decorating and the programs for the Christmas party, and the calendar committee for the year. During this period, the Trinity Ladies Aid had guest stays of other Missouri Lady Aids in the area, and they usually met once a year.
Sales started and were held, and Mrs. Hansen was in charge of buying cards for sale at church. In 1953, brood sales began and continued into the 21st century. 4 banquets were held each year: the father-son banquet, a mother-daughter banquet, a Walton League banquet, and the church workers banquet. In August of 1956, church circles were formed to serve funerals when necessary at the recommendation of the pastor. Weddings were also served. Hats and gloves were always worn to meetings, and women were referred to by their husband's name. Meetings consisted of entertainment, devotions, Bible study by the pastor, business meeting, and refreshments. Projects often went to Lutheran World Relief. The LWML biannual convention in 1955 was canceled due to the segregation policies in New Orleans, where the convention was to be held.
that period in perspective, that was the year we had the church fire, and that was the year they also built the new parsonage and added the education unit. It was also the Kennedy period, and I was a stay-at-home farm wife with 3 kids under 5. Evening Circle formed in October 1962, a brainchild of Rita Meyer, who worked outside her home. The members met at 8:15 p.m. after Thursday school and choir, and were mostly working women and mothers of small children. Their meetings usually consisted of Bible studies by Pastor Sohn, business meetings, and refreshments. Most of the members stayed around afterwards to help with cleanup after the meeting, and as this was another few chances to socialize with other women. All the founding members of the original group, including Rita Meyer and Jackie Huber, are now deceased. Helen Haas and myself, I joined the group in January of 1963, and I am still active at Trinity. Afternoon Circle continued as in the past, but there were several constitutional changes with the advent of the Evening Circle. Members of the Afternoon Circle were finally listed by their own first names in the 1965 roll call, and the Evening Circle followed in 1966. Buzz groups were used by Pastor Garricky to encourage discussion during Bible study. He also chose a topic for the Afternoon Circle called Women Suffrage in the Church, based on an article which was in the Lutheran Witness and some articles of the LCMS Constitution. The question for debate was, do women of the LCMS feel degraded because Lutheran doctrine forbids the right to vote in church affairs? No one took the affirmative position. Saving stamps for missions was a lucrative project, and Juanita Voss sorted and cut the stamps. A movement was begun to discard the older flatware at the church. In 1968, Ann Anderson chaired the committee to buy new flatware and dishes. Both circles bought the white dishes from Sharp's Jewelry at a discount and acquired the current flatware with Betty Crocker coupons, which the entire congregation saved. Income from serving weddings and funerals was also used for this cause. Mother-daughter banquets continued well into the 80s. One memorable one, including a wedding dress fashion show, where Ella Zumack wore her mother's wedding dress with her customary panache.
My era is the 1970s, and this was the era where Ken and I moved here with our 3-year-old and baby. So this era is kind of special to me. 1970 to 79. Greta Meyer was asked if the Evening Circle would take on the card project. Knowing Lucille Waterman's organizational skills, she was asked in March of 1970 if she would manage that project. Lucille said she would try it out for 6 months. 6 months has now turned into 52 years, and there are still cards and other goodies being purchased by our members. The profits usually go to the needs of the church. I think we should say a big hurrah to Lucille. Job Sue Carr, Jan Mullins, Helen Haas, and I made seasonal name tags for many, many years with this project, each taking about 3 months of the year. Others who baked cakes for those having birthdays were Dorothy Rainey, Velma Canor, Donna Maharis, and Karen Thaler. Members provided entertainment. Each birthday person also received a small gift, a fruit or some grooming item. This project changed over the years as state health laws evolved and sadly ended in 2020 due to the COVID pandemic. In 1975, the 16th Biennial Convention was held at St. Paul, Minnesota, and many of our members took a bus from Iowa District West, went to that convention despite construction in the downtown area. Many of Trinity's attendees stayed at the old St. Paul Hotel. It had no swimming pool, but very deep tubs. And a bonus, the water came out a brownish color. Little did we know that the hotel was scheduled for demolition right after the convention. Evening Circle projects included clothes and health supplies for the Rosebud Indian Reservation. I became the expert on refunding. Afternoon and Evening Circle members, plus other church members, would bring cereal boxes, Campbell soup labels, and many other items to church in bags every Sunday. Ken and I Ken grudgingly, would help lug them home to my house after every service. I cut the mounds of labels to the proper size and sent them off for monetary rewards. Sometimes we got coupons, and those were used for needy families too. After the tornado in 1979, when our house was destroyed, friends were carrying out bags of labels and boxes and wondered what in the world this stuff was. Dan Peterson looked at Ken and said, "I feel like I'm carrying garbage." And Ken said, "You are, talk to Jan and keep carrying." Refunding continued until Ken called a halt many years later. Evening Circles Meyer also designed Lenten calendars that had a Bible verse on a particular subject each day and might include something that members needed to count, like the number of windows in your home, and then you would put a penny in for every window. At the end of the Lenten season, these pennies added up and contributed quite a bit to the Evening Circle's mission gifts at the end of the year. At that time, zone rallies were all-day affairs with a theme, skits, programs, mission speakers, Bible studies, singing, and a business meeting. The lunch was lavish and included decorations and favors that we all got to take home as a reminder of the day.
My decade is the 1980s, which is really close to my heart because that's when Joe and I moved up here with the family. And I was asked by a lot of Evening Circle ladies to come and try out LWML, and I joined, and I've been a member ever since. The 21st Biennial Convention, the largest of its kind up to that time, was held at Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa in 1985. It was so popular because housing and all the meetings were held on the campus. The other songbook was introduced, and we purchased a whole bunch of the other songbooks when we got back and have used them with choir, midweek, music, and so forth. Many of us worked at the convention and are sang in the choir. The hostesses made their own green linen-like dresses from McCall's pattern 7356. Refunding continued, and the Evening Circle group was able to purchase a small freezer for the kitchen as well as the piano that is still used up in our sanctuary today. The traveling baskets guaranteed that Evening Circle business meetings would be at least 20 minutes long than planned. And whenever Greta Meyer, often our president would ask, "Where are the traveling baskets?" Another of Greta's ideas, these 3 baskets were circulated among the members with the idea that the member receiving the basket put in a monetary payment for whatever the basket included. We would take out the food or the gift, put something back in, like wonderful baked goods, a plant, or another item, and send it on to the next blessed person on the list. Since we were a busy group, the baskets were a little slow in moving on, and there was always someone at a meeting who sheepishly admitted, "I think I have one in my kitchen closet." This project was a very fruitful one for the money we gave to the missions at the end of the year. The June picnics had become a joint project of afternoon and evening circles, with one circle providing the drinks and setting up for the event, and the other one entertainment. During the 80s, Madeline Cree graciously provided the lower level of our lovely new farmhouse several times for the picnic. With the help of Iris Hinton, Jennifer Creve, and others, it was a festive place, and we all looked forward to going there. One memorable entertainment was the apron style show created by the Afternoon Circle. World Day of Prayer breakfasts were another joint project of the circles, with the vice presidents of both groups in charge. Marcia Sloter made one breakfast unique by setting the table in the Belgian style with the napkins threaded through the tines of the fork. I can't imagine. The programs were meaningful and well attended, and communion was included. In 1989, the Evening Circle decided to help the quilters, which was a small group in those days, by tying a quilt at one of our meetings. We were chatting and tying away when Phyllis Drake happened to drop something on the floor. She bent down to pick it up and discovered these huge loops of yarn that were hanging underneath the quilt. So Phyllis started to laugh, and we all joined her as we looked at the huge mess. This was our first and last quilt tying project. And the poor quilters had to go and tear out all of the yarn that we really messed up. Both circles often had speakers, with the current AFS students being very popular. Both groups usually took a one-day trip in place of a monthly meeting. In 1986, the mother-daughter tea replaced the banquet, and the other banquets had disappeared.
My decade is the 90s. When I moved here in 92, I had many banner patterns that we had used at a church in Denison where we had lived. Evening Circle was willing to make several of them that we still use today, such as the gold angels at Christmas, the resurrected Christ, connecting our community with Christ banner that you see when you walk out of church every Sunday, and the Easter and Advent banners. In 1990, the Afternoon Circle had a work day at the Kasuth County Care Facility. Christmas that are still used today on our Christmas trees here at Trinity were also made by the afternoon and evening circles. Each member who felt even a little bit crafty was given several patterns, white felt, and other supplies to make the designs, and even other family members chipped in to sew and stuff those decorations. The demise of our Evening Circle's traveling baskets took place that September of 1996, and donations have been made instead. Evening and afternoon circles both were having Christmas parties and often inviting members of the other group to attend. Some of these were out of town, but the most lavish were held at the Raper House on South Jones Street. Randy and Chris had extensively remodeled the lovely old house, most recently owned by Marguerite Keeler. And Chris invited both circles twice to celebrate Christmas there. Many of us had not been there inside the house, so it was an extremely popular venue. Evening Circle members would provide the food, service, and table decorations. In 1927, Pastor Turner's family invited the afternoon and evening circles to the parsonage for a Christmas party. They put on a skit called The Life at the Parsonage, a spoof on the perfect pastor's family, followed by what really happens in the parsonage. It was unforgettable. Evening Circle, along with Sunday School, adopted a child through the Christian Children's Fund. Part of their activities paid for the education of a child in a lower income family, and we tried to correspond with that person during the year. Secret Sisters were often part of both groups' years, and the big reveal would come at our December meeting. Many of us still have gifts that our Secret Sisters gave us. The Evening Circle Cookbook, here's my worn out copy, was published in 1997 with Vicki Bowman and Greta Meyer doing most of the organizing. When those boxes first arrived, we didn't know where to store them all, and we worried that it would take years to sell them. But before long, they sold like hotcakes and they were all gone. Again, the money went to mission projects. If any of you know the whereabouts of one of these cookbooks no longer in use, please let an Evening Circle member know, because they are still highly desired. Kitchen cleaning was done by both of our circles, with the 2 people from each circle assigned a cleaning project on the month when they served refreshments at a regular meeting. The afternoon circle decided to have a salad bar in 1997, and both circles pitched in to set up with Evelyn Runke as our leader, bringing salads and deviled eggs, and Marcia Sloter agreed to manage selling our tickets. Beef burgers were later added. Our profit was divided between the 2 circles and used for mission projects. Some rallies were now held in the late afternoon and evening with a supper, devotions by a pastor, Bible study, a speaker, a skit, and a business meeting. Saturday mornings were also tried, but the attendance was slim.
Good morning. The reason I joined LWML was because my mother was a member, Grace Ribbon, back in 1949 and was the secretary of the LWML group at that time. That was 2 years before I was born. In 2000 to 2009, the era I have, refunding helped to buy some of the furnishings and wall and floor coverings for the fireside room and nearby bathrooms. Pam and Joe Gogarty and Ken and Jan Andrews were mostly responsible for the redecorating, and this remodeling effort was sorely needed because these rooms were used by wedding parties, which the wedding parties dressed in the church. In 2001, Evening Circle began writing Christmas cards to Trinity's college students and military personnel. Nancy Bowker now organizes this project. Is Nancy here? I'd like to thank Nancy for that also. Evening Circle switched to easier craft projects like the witness bracelets that Marilyn Bernardo taught us to make. Those went to Taiwan and on a Trinity mission trip. Most ministries in 2004 were handed out on RAGBRAI and at the Iowa State Fair. In 2003, Evening Circle began a Prayer Partners activity. Each year in January, they had a devotional on prayer, and then pairs of members prayed for each other's concerns and joy for the year. In 2006, the Circle sponsored a July trip to Plymouth Playhouse in Minnesota. Vicki Bowman made the bags. The rest of the group helped fill them, and the project began. Others from our congregation kept them full. Later, Joe Sentgraf helped replace the worn-out bags, and Sherry Bengen and her crew filled them each week. The Afternoon Circle applied for a mission grant for a project titled Christian Response to Pain Caused by Divorce. Although they did not receive a grant, it was a worthwhile experience to apply. Each circle now has its own World Day of 2009, Evening Circle was asked to wash the tables and chairs in the new Life Center twice a year. Later, this was reduced to once a year.
Well, my journey started back in 1988. I was a young mother with a 3.5-year-old and a little 2-month-old baby when one Sunday in my church bulletin box was this invitation to join the Lutheran ladies at Greta Meyer's house on a Sunday morning for a brunch and to learn about the LWML. I remember calling Greta Meyer up and said, "Thank you for the invitation, but I am a full-time nursing mother of a 2-month-old little baby girl, so I don't think I can attend." And Greta said, "Oh, you will be there because we're all mothers, and I can give you a spot in the house where you can quietly nurse your baby." So I did go, and that started my journey. And then 2 years later, with still a lot of little children, Evelyn Rumpke came up to me one day in church and asked me if I would go to the 50th National Convention in Cleveland, Ohio, with her, Joanne Leake, and Iris Hinton. And I was like really confused because they're all old enough to be my mother, and they were all afternoon ladies, and how did they know me from being an evening lady? But I remember going home and telling my husband, I was chosen by these ladies, well, can I go? Many years later, I figured out it was the grace of God that chose those ladies to choose me to go, because they started me on my most amazing life journey with LWML. In 2008, Iowa just request that convention at Okoboji for the district was hosted by Emmitsburg Zone and our zone, the Northeast Zone. And that led me to my era of 2010 through 2019. In 2015, the 36th Biennial National Convention was held at the Wells Fargo Arena in Des Moines, Iowa. Many afternoon and evening circle ladies volunteered to pick up and, volunteered at the convention, and I myself was the head of the hospitality committee. I had 80 women working under me. Can you imagine? For 2 years, we worked to put this convention on, and it was a very highly attended, successful convention. I now know so many women I can get stranded anywhere in Iowa, and I can find a Lutheran woman to help me. Evening Circle began putting together hygiene kits for Lutheran World Relief and now Orphan Grain Train. Afternoon Circle provides fruit and cookie plates and Thanksgiving cards for Trinity's shut-ins over 85 years old. And as a side note, I have now attended 15 national LWML conventions, with the highlight being union with that many Lutheran-minded women in one spot worshiping and praising God. There is nothing better. Now we've come to 2020, to the present time. As of April 2022, zone rallies will be held only once per year on a Sunday afternoon in April. The number of members attending these rallies has dwindled, and the smaller churches in the zone do not have enough members to host the rallies. The COVID pandemic has caused the changes in our circles. Evening Circle now meets at 7 p.m. for 1 hour on the first Thursday evening with a Bible study, private members, and a business meeting when not doing a mission activity. The afternoon circle meets on the first Thursday afternoon with devotions, a Bible study by the pastor, a business meeting, and refreshments.
Before Jane brings the conclusion of our program, we'd just like to give her a huge thank you for all her research and for writing our program today.
The original Concordia Ladies Aid Society's main purpose was to make quilt squares and have devotions back in 1913. And if you don't believe me, we still have the secretary's books from then on. They met in homes and often didn't have a business meeting. They didn't even have a constitution. The original Concordia Ladies Aid Society's main purpose was to make quilt squares and have devotions back in 1913. And if you don't believe me, we still have the secretary's books from then on. They met in homes and often didn't have a business meeting. They didn't even have a constitution written in English until the 1930s. And you can imagine, they had their constitution in German until that time. LWML, since those days, has grown and become a vital part of Trinity and the world. Our Mike Box offerings alone have funded over $100 million in mission grants since the organization's inception in 1942. And some of us who went on short mission trips to Asia were able to experience some results of those grants. When we went to Taiwan, Greenemeyer and I went to the chapel on the Concordia Middle School campus, and that chapel was funded through Mainz. They were studying how to use a liturgy because they had not done that until that time. When we went to South Korea, we stayed in a dormitory that also was funded through Mainz. So we got to see what was going on with our money. Over the years, we've had many programs and activities to recruit new members with varying degrees of success. And as you probably heard from others, many of us became members because of one other person asking us to come. That was my experience. Ann Anderson asked me to come, and because I was concerned about Bible studies that I was attending in another church, and she said, come to ours. Pastor Sohn does a wonderful job. And that was true. Now, like many other organizations, LWML is at a crossroads where many people no longer have the time or desire to meet together. We hope to have 80 more years of mission work, Bible studies, and fellowship together. And we hope that the Lord will lead you, who are Trinity members today, to join us. And now, let's close with prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for giving these women to our church and giving our mission as fellow members for the love of the Lord to share the gospel with people all over the world. We ask you to continue to bless us and lead others to join us in this great cause. In your name, amen. And now we'll close with, they'll know we are Christians by our love, and that's on the other side of your song sheet.
Hand in hand.
Thanks to Donna, who played for us today, too. So, thank you all.